If you're clicking on our website, you know that you are searching for a greater expression of health for your kids. I've interviewed thousands of parents at this stage of I still consider my young career, just over a decade, but at the same time, I know I'm not new, and I know I'm actually incredibly versed. We at Future Generations are incredibly versed at understanding the paucity of vibrancy and health that our kids are expressing today. If your kid is expressing some challenges, whether they are neurodevelopmental, neurobehavioral, if they're immune system based or digestive based, if they're mental, emotional, you name it, I will say at this point, and I tell virtually every kid who is of age, especially the tweens, I affirm in them that you don't intimidate us in any capacity. And mom and dad, it's not your fault. I say that humbly and I say that directly. It is not your fault. And I say that because it built into us, more moms and dads, is a biological guilt that I promise you is there to help us serve and love our kids so that they may sleep, poop, eat, function, be healthy and safe, live free. And it's this deep-seated thing that keeps us going as parents to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to serve them in our greatest capacity so that they live the greatest version of their life, and their life potential is based upon their health potential. And so I'm going to go through some brief statistics. One, because most people don't hear this from your public health experts. Most people don't hear this from your conventional medical doctors. And at the same time, I've been saying these numbers and they've been steadily getting worse over the last 13 years. And it's really important to know that these numbers are continually worsening and there is no end in sight. So at this stage, 54% of our kids, this is a 13-year-old study at the time of this recording, express some sort of chronic illness. 1 in 6 has some sort of learning disorder, neurodevelopmental, neurobehavioral disorder. 1 in 4 in the United States requires at this stage special education. I say this with the reality of the trajectory of where our kids are going, which the latest research shows that our children have a lower life expectancy than us parents. And that is actually a biological implausibility unless we have been doing enough damage to our kids societally. It is, again, not your fault, mom and dad. But I wanted to define a workshop that I teach, which is an hour and a half, so I can't actually go that far into it, but something called the perfect storm. And the perfect storm is essentially that the level of physical, chemical, mental, emotional, and spiritual toxicity that our children are having to navigate in today's world is far greater than anyone ever conceptualized the human experience was ever going to have to navigate. Most people don't recognize that sitting is the new smoking and that sedentarism is one of the most toxic things, not just for kids and not just for adults and not just for us mere mortals, but they've studied Olympic athletes and the level of scar tissue and blood sugar dysregulation that they experience within minutes of stagnation is only exponentially more so in our kids and in us. The physical stuckness of poor posture is dramatic. And when you understand, which we will teach you over your journey with us, that you only get one spine and everybody brushes their teeth and everybody flosses their teeth and everybody goes to the dentist. But whenever I ask anybody if they've done their spinal hygiene exercises, it's crickets chirping. Because we've never put those two words together. Neurospinal and hygiene is the single most important hygiene that we could ever actually do and commit to ourselves on a day-to-day basis. Chemically, we have 80,000 chemicals in the world today. Only 2,300 have been studied for generally regarded as safe and never in combination. And so we have 2,300 known toxins at this stage. That is as ubiquitous as food coloring. It's as ubiquitous as food additives, as sugar substitutes, as crazy as glyphosate, and virtually all the things that we would run into at a public park or an institution. That's also including a lot of things that we will actually find in our public water system. Fun fact, go ahead and Google cross-section of a tap water pipe and go out and invest in a whole house water filter, right? Mentally, emotionally, we know that over the last 3 years that our kids have been put through the ringer in terms of losing community, losing friends, not seeing faces around their schools, but the mental emotional crisis that the CDC and these public institutions and our county supervisors came out with late into COVID. We knew, because we've been studying the research that many other pediatric and prenatal chiropractors have been studying for a long time, was already a crisis long before there was a COVID, right? And so at this point, anxiety in our children, especially in the late teens, is greater than 50%. And the suicidal ideation and the lack of what we would call in our practice the optimal mental resiliency is just not really heard of unless it comes down to you parents, right? And then those kids that do have that, I always high five parents and thank them for doing the work in terms of making sure that they safeguard their kids' minds. The spiritual toxicity that exists out there, the indoctrinations, the curricular patterns in public school systems, the essential in the state of California removal of kids from their homes and households and removing parents from their picture overall. The undertone of that schools know better than parents is crazy for those families that would actually be attracted to our brand and to our company and to our clinic. And so to you, I let you know that if you are doing any sort of conscious work in your parenting, thank you so much for doing that. And again, I say those statistics with all the compassion in the world, because behind those numbers, because they're just numbers, is the experience that our kids are having to navigate going through life today. The sleepless nights, the mental anxiousness, the overall losing of community, the continual changing of what is actually, quote, normal and acceptable for us is hard to reconcile because we lose community so much, right? But at the end of the day, it's so hard for our kids because on one day, it's cool to do one thing. On another day, it's deadly to do another thing. And at the end of the day, in the middle of that is our children, and they are more confused than I've ever seen them. And so this video actually is going to go through 4 simple ways to optimize your children's health. And the first one that I have to start with, because I'm infinitely biased, is chiropractic. And not chiropractic in a sense that just because you're well adjusted means you're going to be well forever. It's actually the opposite, right? Just because you are well adjusted does not make you well. But I will tell you, because I've been doing this long enough, that it is impossible to be well without being well adjusted. When you recognize the depth of the necessity of movement neurology, especially movement neurology as it relates to the spine, as that feeds the most important nutrient to the brain, you know that chiropractic is actually very, very essential. When you look at your children in the mirror and you can actually see postural asymmetries and postural distortions that you know are affecting them now, just think about gravity being something that they're going to contend with for the rest of their lives, and recognize that nobody's posture gets better over time without some sort of work. But I will say this in a more direct way. What is the role of a healthy nervous system? The nervous system is trending. The vagus nerve is trending. The prefrontal cortex is trending. The amygdala is trending as a driver of sympathetic dominance. The sympathetic parasympathetic dominance is trending. The parasympathetic polyvagal theory is trending. The point is what is your effective, reliable avenue towards a healthy nervous system with your children? And I will tell you that after interviewing thousands of parents at this stage, most of you dabble. And that's not any offense to you. It's just that kids have a hard time committing to breath work. Kids have a hard time committing to grounding. Kids have a hard time committing to perfect sleep. And kids have a hard time navigating some of the things that we put ourselves through to help us self-heal, right? The cold plunges, the saunas, all those things are often a little bit harder for kids. But for me, what I would say is nothing replaces chiropractic. Chiropractic is the single most essential natural health profession in the world today, because not only do we affect self-healing and the energy of the body, but we actually physically work with the terrain of the body, which until we can teleport through walls, until we're in an anti-gravity environment, we will have to contend with our physical body. And no one is a better expert in understanding your children's than a pediatric chiropractor, those that are trained and certified and have done all the work to get to the highest level of qualification, which we have. But now the second one is really simple. It's eating well, right? This comes down to a few words for me. It's from Michael Pollan's book In Defense of Food, right? If you haven't read that book, and if you're in any way, on the search for the perfect nutrition, please read that book. But he comes down to a few words. It goes, eat food, not real food, not fake food, not things that come in packages, not things with labels, not things with health promotions on them. Eat food, things that come off a tree, things that come from the earth. Eat food, not too much. The Japanese called it, what is it called? It's like hari hachibu. Basically eating to the point where you're like 75% full, right? Not too much. And the end is mostly plants. And most of us would get along really well if we just did fresh fiber first. People that don't do vegetables, if you actually did a smoothie every single day, I can't tell you the dramatic transformation of your body. If you've already been through that journey of smoothies and juices and that type of thing, then adding things like broths, adding things like structured water could be incredibly healing for your body. Adding things like organs and glandulars from regeneratively agricultured meats, so radically important. A pound of regeneratively agricultured beef is far more nutrient dense than virtually anything else in the world. And if you just added that, it would transform your body and your mind and your health. Hydration is another factor in this. Please, as I shared a little bit earlier about the tap water that you have, I would say number one is make sure that you reconcile the quality and the cleanliness of the water that you expose you and your kids to. Hugely important. I cannot stress that enough. For me, in our home, we have a whole house reverse osmosis, and then under the sink we have another RO system, but this one actually mineralizes the water, and then we add things to restructure our water and things like that to make sure that the quality is the highest. Principle number 3 is move well. Move well is getting your kids out to play. My son is about 21 months, and it's pretty remarkable how early kids want to wrestle. And it's really interesting how, as much as they'd like to make us think that genders are the same, that my son absolutely loves to wrestle and growl and beat me up, and my daughter never wanted to, right? And those are generalizations. That's my own little test group in my kids, but we see that every single day in our practice. So age appropriate playing, getting them to move, getting them to be agile, getting them to be also in nature, getting them to breathe. If your children are too young to do breath work, make sure that you model it. Every single morning, my wife and I, we go to our playroom, we lay down, we open our Wim Hof app, and we have done breath work in our new home for a year. We do 3 rounds, and that's something that our kids know now, that at some point in the morning, before we do anything else, our kids are saying, breathe, 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 because they know that that's our rhythm. The next thing is sunlight, making sure that you get outside. You can go into all the infrared saunas in the world, but if you never see the light of day, you will be deficient of one of the most single important healing aspects of it. They made us afraid of our air. They made us afraid of smiles. They made us afraid of people. They made us afraid of sunlight, and it's actually just not true. There's actually a whole concept of sun gazing, and actually, if you're this into the self-healing world, people are actually sunning their genitals and recognizing that there is a supercharged nature that the UV light and the actual sun exposure expresses in our human potential that we largely have no concept of today. Principle number 4 is think well. And think well is essentially making sure that you have a growth mindset, making sure that on a day-to-day basis, right after breathing, we go straight into our affirmations. We do about 3 minutes of affirmations that my wife and I got from a book called The Breakthrough Experience by Dr. John Demartini. At the end of each chapter is uplifting affirmations that we have essentially committed to memory, so much so that our 4-year-old can actually recite them alongside with us. Doesn't mean that every single day that we do them, we feel perfect and it's all rainbows and puppy dogs. No, I would go as far as to say that every time we do them, we always end up recognizing that there are some that we know we have a lot of work to do. But this category, think well, also has to do with our ability to understand possibility, our ability to believe in other people, our ability to, when the whole world is divided and polarized, to recognize that unification, especially through our diversity, is one of the single most important things that Stephen Covey expressed as the fifth habit in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People: seek first to understand rather than to be understood. And the category in this one also includes sleep. And sleep being one of the major difference makers that I've ever seen, whether you have an Oura ring that tracks your sleep or Garmin's that track your sleep. I don't necessarily do that at all, but things like having a blackout shades, making sure that you have somewhat of a little bit of a white noise sound machine, and making sure that all of your technology is off, and that you make sure that EMFs are reconciled in your home. Those things become really, really important to making sure not only that your sleep quality is optimized, but that you have the best chance to actually have that mental clarity and mental balance that largely most people just kind of try to do. So again, those 4 principles are: number 1, chiropractic and a ridiculously resilient and healthy nervous system. Principle number 2, eat well, which includes hydration, but eat food, mostly plants, and not too much, right? Third principle, move well, which literally play for your kids is like food for their soul, but nature, getting out in nature and grounding, breath work, and making sure that they're actually breathing and good diaphragmatic breathing, modeling that for them when they're younger, and sunlight as much as you can, especially in the winter months, becomes so important. And the 4th principle, last, is think well. Think well is the abundance mindset, is recognizing that we believe in others, believing in community, and believing in actually being with each other, that the oxytocin that we have when we connect with real people in real life, especially those of an aligned community like we have at Future Generations, is far greater than any lab-derived fake virus that they could ever launch into the populace, or any toxin that they would ever launch into the populace, is far trumped by the oxytocin that we have in community. And of course, sleep being an adjunct to ensuring that your think well and your mental resiliency is at its optimal capacity. I'm sincerely grateful for you clicking on our link and going into this video. We are so grateful to at least have this opportunity to pour into you. If you make it to our office, which I highly encourage you to do, that whole concept of recognizing that on 2 ends, the optimal potential and optimal expression of your well-being is one of our first and foremost always, but secondarily, one of the most important things that we realize, especially in our small town of Escondido, in the northeast corner of San Diego, the best county in all of America, is that the aligned community that we have built for over 13 years is one of the most important to pour into and be a part of, because when you are in community healing together, then that's our version of healing the world. I am at a position at this point where I don't believe that the whole world is going to transform today. I think we have a lot of years, and I think we have a lot of challenging times ahead of us. However, what I do know is that the work that we've done at Future Generations in pouring into this beautiful community has been one of the most saving graces, powerful saving graces, that virtually every family has verbalized to us for so many years. And we know at this stage we're only getting started. And we're grateful at this opportunity to share with you, and for all future opportunities that we get to pour into your health and your family so that they may express their fullest potential. Love and appreciate you all.